Welcome into Onorato Bagnardi. A little rapid reaction here, Bags. We have breaking news. Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame, the National Baseball Hall of Fame, has one new member tonight. One where I thought for sure we were going to get three. It is now just one guy. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens fall short. And look, for as much as the one guy we're going to talk about getting in, it's these two guys that we will talk about more than David Ortiz, who will in fact be the one person voted in by the Baseball Writers Association in the class of 2022. Just your blush reaction here on Bonds and Clemens' final year on the ballot, not getting in.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they're the headliners. Final year on the ballot. I mean, Bonds is, of course, the all-time home run leader, the single-season home run leader. So he was the one everybody had circled in his final year. Was he going to make it? I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this because part of what goes into deciding, or what the writers should be deciding when they vote, is integrity. The integrity of the game, the integrity of the player. And I don't see how you can look at these two guys or any of the steroid guys. That's going to get the big poppy in a minute. I think there's a contradiction here, which I also have a problem with. But I'm okay with him not being in the Hall of Fame. I've seen a lot of people our age basically saying, or even younger than us, you know, this kind of means then my childhood doesn't even count. You're basically saying it means nothing because you're not telling the history of baseball properly unless you have these guys in. But to me, that's not what the Hall of Fame is there for. It's not a museum to tell the history of the sport. It's to honor the best players for what they did on the field.
Well, okay, hang on a second.
They cheated.
The Hall of Fame is a museum to document the history of baseball. The room of plaques is separate than the museum itself. Bonds and Clemens are in the Hall of Fame. They have career artifacts that are already in the Hall of Fame, or I should say maybe the museum, if we want to make that distinction here. Okay. But I'm with you. I would not have voted for either guy, and I'm not telling you that I'm qualified to have a vote, but I watched every single step basically of both of these guys' careers, and I would not put them in the Hall of Fame. Here are two arguments that I absolutely hate. I hate the argument, well, Bonds and Clemens were Hall of Famers before they used steroids. I absolutely hate that one, and I lean on this crutch, which becomes tired. I'm tired of hearing myself say it even, and that is, if a guy is up 10 strokes on the 18th green at the Masters, he's not going to get the green jacket if he cheats on that even one putt, okay? Or if he does something to cheat on that final hole. So on the back 9 or whatever it is, if he cheats, he's disqualified. That's why I hate the argument of like, well, Bonds' first half of his career was legit. He's a Hall of Famer. Too bad. Then he should have just stuck it out, and he'd have been a Hall of Famer today. He may not be the all-time home runs leader. He wouldn't have been. And he wouldn't hit 73 in one season, but he would have gone to Cooperstown. There's no doubt about that. The other argument I hate is, well, there are already guys in the Hall of Fame who use steroids. I'm not going to throw names around here, but we know that to be true. There are guys who have been elected to the Hall of Fame who definitely used steroids. They never tested positive for it because baseball wasn't testing. And they weren't suspended because baseball didn't have the program in place already for illegal substances. But I don't want to hear that they already were Hall of Famers before they started using, and I don't want to hear that there are already guys in who used. That is not the standard. We are judging each individual player on their resume, and do you live up to the standards of a Hall of Famer? Not who's already in or what somebody did or didn't do. It's what did you do? And for Bonds and Clemens, they are the poster childs. They are the lightning rods of the steroid era.
And that's just it. So Eric here, I'll bring in a comment, makes a decent point about you have other people who you could certainly question their integrity on other fronts. And I agree with that. But the difference with those people is, integrity of character versus integrity of the game. And if you cheat, you're cheating. This is about recognizing individual excellence, right? Excellence at the highest level. You are performing this game at its highest level. But if you cheated to do it, how can you then get that top honor? So yeah, there are going to be bad people who get elected for what they did on the field. And I think they should be, because that is something that, in my mind, you can separate because it's about recognizing those on-field achievements. But I have to look at the on-field and say, This guy cheated. Barry Bonds was a cheater, right? I mean, look at the numbers. So I saw a stat today that said before 1996, there was never a season in which 12 players hit 40 home runs. It happened the next 6 seasons in a row after that, and it hasn't happened since after the steroids thing really blew up in 2002. So you can't tell me that those 6 years weren't completely inflated. I know a lot of guys were doing it, but that doesn't make it right. That doesn't mean that we should then just excuse this guy because somebody else did it. And it is an argument to be made that others are in the hall who use steroids. I don't think they should be. I wasn't advocating for those people. So I can sit here today and say I don't think Bonds or Clemens should be. And I don't think Big Papi should be.
As surprised as I am, I do agree with the way this went down. And why
are you surprised then?
Because it just felt like the baseball writers were going to hold a grudge for as long as possible and make them wait till the very last year, which here we are. It used to be 15 years you'd be on the ballot. It was a few years ago, it was shortened to 10. And then it felt like, okay, well, Bonds and Clemens will get in on the 10th year. They inched up. They were over 60% last year. They're both about 61% last year. I thought they're going to jump. This is the Baseball Writers Association just kind of holding a grudge, but we'll let you in at the very last minute. And now not only do they let him in, I mean, 66 and 65.2. I mean, they're really not even close. You got to get to 75. You're not even really all that close at those percentage numbers.
Will they get in ultimately through the Veterans Committee?
I think so. And it isn't, what do they call it now? I don't know. I'm not sure what, but it is the Veterans Committee as we know it. I think they eventually get in, but why? Do you know what I mean? Like at this point, why put them in?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, so you have to look at it, I guess.
So here, let me say this here, because Eric, I've already kind of made this point here, but I love that Eric is weighing in on our conversation. I'm with you. Sorry, Harold Baines, Mike Mussina, like these are guys that don't necessarily belong in the way we view Hall of Famers. But again, I hate that you're going to say, hey, Baines is in, so you got to put the other guys in, right? I hate that. Just look at Bonds, look at Clemens, look at Roland, look at Wagner, look at A-Rod eventually, and decide, do these guys deserve to get in or not? Not who's already in. Well, they're better than that guy, so you got to put him in. I don't like judging a Hall of Fame career on that standard.
Do you think if Barry Bonds was a different person, did the same thing, but handled everything differently, came out, admitted to things, apologized for things, maybe. Do you think we'd be in a little bit of a different situation? I mean, he is not a likable guy. He was never really a likable guy for the media, right? And you have, of course, sports writers here who are doing this vote. Do you have a problem as a baseball fan? And I guess you probably don't since you already answered this, but do you have a problem with the all-time home run leader not being in the Hall of Fame? Keeping in mind that the all-time hits leader is not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, and what does that say about baseball, right? That you've got two of the most significant record holders in the sport's history, and neither one has a plaque. Again, I'll say this just one more time here because it's going to get tired. They are in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
They're not in the room of plaques.
Would you see like a steroid wing? Would you be okay with that? People have said put him in, but there's an asterisk.
I'm okay. Look, if they voted those two guys in the way I thought they would tonight, I would have been okay with it. I put my hands up and said, you know what? They were great baseball players. As enhanced as their statistics may be, they were great baseball players. But I would want it on the plaque, explicitly written, either used, admitted to using, whatever you wanted to do there with Bonds and Clemens, and eventually A-Rod. Tim says A-Rod will get in prior to the 10th year. I don't know what his percentage was this year. He was tracking at over 30%. We'll see. I don't know about the sports writers loving Yankees, and that's why A-Rod gets in. But maybe A-Rod's confession is enough for baseball writers to put him in. Remember, A-Rod was suspended for a full year. Clemens and Bonds were never punished because baseball didn't have those protocols in place. A-Rod is suspended for using performance-enhancing drugs. That one, I think, might be tough for a lot of people to get over.
Do you like this system? the sports writers, the 75%. Do you like the way it works?
How else would you do it? Sam says 34% for A-Rod, which is where he was tracking.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how else you would do it. I mean, for me, when a guy like Derek Jeter isn't unanimous, right, you immediately have to question the whole system. Is 75% a good number? Is that the right number? It seems like it is. It sounds like it is. But then you wonder about the kind of people who are doing the voting. And if some of them are the kind of people who would leave Derek Jeter off.
But you've got more than 300 voters. Basically, every year you've got more than 300 voters. It would take a lot for kind of the disingenuous voter to spoil the pot. I mean, I know Griffey and Jeter, and they were close. And we could all argue that Mays should have been 100%. A lot of guys should have been 100%. For whatever reason, they weren't. But they got in on the first ballot, and nobody cares percentage-wise how many votes he'd got and didn't get. You're in on the first ballot. That's significant.
I'm just saying, it seems like there's no rhyme or reason to me of how people are going to vote, what percentage certain players are going to wind up on. Like you said, is it a thing where they make people wait a certain number of years? And if that's the case, is that the right way? To me, it just seems, I mean, the whole thing is kind of a political setup anyway, where it just seems like there's too much at play. But it should be decided differently, I feel like. I don't have a great answer for you, but it just feels like dirty to me, which I guess fits baseball.
Well, yeah, you're right. So you like the Veterans Committee approach better then? Because there you've got a mix of people who covered the sport, people who played the sport, historians of the sport. That maybe is a little more fair to you, right?
I think so. Yeah, a little more diversity in that crowd. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But I don't know that these guys ultimately do get in. I guess once enough time passes, they will. Do you think Pete Rose ever will?
Matt says, yeah, Pete Rose should be in. I'm maybe talking out of both sides of my mouth here. I kind of think Pete Rose should be in. There isn't proof that he bet against his team. And if he's always betting on his team, isn't he doing the absolute best job as a manager to win that game, which is the whole point of the sport anyway?
Yeah. And also, right. And
we're not putting him in as a manager, we're putting him in as a player.
Right. And also, if you're not throwing a game, if you're not cheating or again, it's about the integrity of the game. That issue of these guys clearly cheated to get to where they got to. And how can you look the other way on that?
All right, let's bring in Eric's comment here. Just to be clear, Bonds and Clemens are alleged to have done PEDs. Yes and no. I mean, we know Bonds did it, but that he claims to have unknowingly used the cream and the clear. Clemens, same kind of thing. He'll deny, but through all that court stuff with Brian McNamee and Andy Pettit, we know where this went with Clemens. Ortiz, he did test positive. Well, he was on the list. He was on a list in 2003 that was not supposed to be made public of guys who had tested positive for PEDs. This was before Major League Baseball had kind of the standard testing program that they currently have, but they were trying to sort through how rampant is it in the sport. And this was a list that was not supposed to be made public in 2003. Ortiz was, in fact, on that list.
But it
wanted to talk about him.
It was made public. So explain to me, so these 300 voters, they know that. Explain to me how steroids can be the difference for these two guys, because clearly it is. If steroids aren't in play, these guys are first ballot Hall of Famers. So steroids matters for them, doesn't matter for Poppy? How come? And that's what I mean. This system seems so broken. It seems so flawed to me. If Poppy tested positive or if he's tied to it just like these other guys, how does he get to almost 78%?
Yeah.
And the guy who has the all-time home run record, if that doesn't matter to you, the steroids, he doesn't get in.
So this maybe answers your earlier question. If Bonds publicly with his personality handles it differently, right? Poppy's this fun-loving character. He drops the F-bomb after the Boston Marathon bombings and it goes viral. Everybody thinks it's the greatest thing ever. He's a heck of a postseason player too. He's the greatest DH of all time. There's no doubt about that. 541 home runs, was the ALCS MVP in 04 when the Red Sox had that incredible comeback and then swept the Cardinals in the World Series. 3 rings with Boston. There is a lot to his resume.
His credentials are not the issue. There's as much to Bond's resume and Clemens.
If you were to tell me, oh my God, if somebody said to me, well, Ortiz, we just like him better, that would make me lose my mind.
Right. So is that how people are voting? Is that what? I don't get it. I don't get it. It's like T.O. to me, right? It's like if you don't like the guy,
yeah,
he doesn't. I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't understand that mentality of it. So is it mostly about the steroids? I believe it is.
I love this. Brian Bud Selig, who knew about steroids, is in.
He is. Selig is sort of the poster child of the leadership of the steroid era. He's in the Hall of Fame. So the contradiction is the thing I have the biggest problem with. I agree, keep Bonds out, keep Clemens out, but then don't turn around and put Poppy in and others who you have put in. I don't like the system in general. I really don't.
All right. Only one guy. Nobody was voted in last year, and so Jeter still kind of had his time with Larry Walker. Only one guy, and it's Ortiz. I'll tell you what, I'm still surprised. I just thought baseball writers' mentality, we're going to make these guys suffer. We're going to make these guys wait, but we will eventually put them in. Some other guys who got votes, Scott Rowland, 63.2%. Kurt Schilling, who after last year said, take me off the ballot. I don't even want to be considered anymore. 58.6%. Billy Wagner, Todd Helton, each at 52%. Who didn't get in that you would put in?
Well, did anybody not get in who you think ultimately will? Any of those names you just mentioned?
I thought Rowland would be a little closer than the 63%. I'm going to speak with bias here. Andrew Jones is one of the greatest defensive center fielders I've ever seen play the game. I think he's
one of the best first basemen.
10 gold gloves at center field. Put him in. Is who one of the best first basemen?
Todd Helton.
No.
Well, I mean, offensively, I mean, he's going to have the Colorado. He's going to have the Colorado sort of bias that go against him, right? They're going to say his numbers were inflated there, but I don't know. I mean, I remember him as a really, really good player. Yeah, it's always that question for us. You know, that superstar guy. Like we kind of classify him, right, as you have your all-stars and your superstars. I think it's a little bit easier for us to do it in basketball, but you just know who those guys are. And then you have the guys who are those superstars for such a long period of time, then it becomes Hall of Famer. I think you and I sort of view the Hall of Fame as far as who should be in and who shouldn't based on on-field play pretty similarly. We both have, I think, a higher bar, although baseball's bar, it's higher than the NBA, for instance, or basketball and the NFL.
But so it has slipped in recent years to everybody's point watching us here that guys like Musina, guys like Harold Baines, they got in differently. Moose got voted in. Baines got the Veterans Committee. But it feels like it has slipped a little bit. We're a little more forgiving these days, which I don't really love when we're trying to determine a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah. And we're talking about guys take steroids out of it. Just what they did statistically. We look at the numbers and just how you remember them. You remember them as a Hall of Famer. And it's almost like if the answer isn't immediately yes, then it's probably a no if you're going to have a really high bar. But of course, then you have these guys where it would be yes, but, and here they are left off on their final chance to get in this way anyway.
Yeah. All right. That's it for us here on Onorato and Bagnardi. Rapid reaction. I'm still surprised. No Bonds, no Clemens. Do they find a way in at some other point post-career? We'll see. We're here on the News Channel 13 Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube page every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Come hang out with us. Pat Leonard, New York Daily News, on the New York Giants head coaching search with us this Thursday morning, live from Alpenhaus. And then a special Friday show is another Popeyes is popping up in the Capital Region. Bags. No Bonds, no Clemens, but the voters say yes to Big Poppy. Hey, you want to make a quick prediction for the people who are watching us now on who advances to the Super Bowl? Go ahead. Who you got?
Oh boy, throwing me on the spot. I was still mulling this over.
No one's going to remember this.
No, you know what? I'm going to say the Chiefs.
Me too.
And the Rams.
Me too. Well, that was boring. All right. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Have a great Tuesday night. Hope you come back and hang out with us on Thursday. David Ortiz into the Hall of Fame. Bonds and Clemens miss out their final year on the